All right, today we're going to do a little review so you all can be a little better prepared for the multiple choice comprehensive exam as well as the Rome DBA. And so just real quick, I'm going to look at each of these different modules and kind of quickly go through and point out the things that you want to be paying most attention to. When we're looking at the prehistoric period, the things you're going to be looking for most are those caves of Lascaux, understanding those cave paintings. You want to know a little bit about what the materials, the media they used, and sort of why they were done in those caves. There are some evolving theories about sort of the purpose of these paintings, but based on what your modules explain to you, you need to kind of understand what the purpose is generally understood to be, and who in the society often did those types of paintings and so forth. We're going to want to know about the Venus of Willendorf. This is one of those works of art that you are going to see. Why is it important as we continue and look through the early art history, and it being one of the very first sculptures in the round, or works in the round. Okay, let's go back to the next. Near East, this one is going to have several things we're going to be looking at. So specifically, you want to know what a ziggurat is and why is that important. Understanding sort of where the different rulers fall in is going to be a little bit important. Mostly you want to focus on things like the Sumerians came up with. Writing is an important aspect as we look forward. So anything about the early writings, whether it's Sumerian, Egyptian, Mesopotamian, you want to understand the early communications. When we look at the evolution of art, specifically as we look through the early Eastern, the Egyptian, even the Greek and the Roman and so forth, you're going to look for those progressions in sculpture, and sort of this is that building block. The Sumerians are really going to start understanding that evolution as we see it, and you're going to recognize the hopefully by looking at a piece sort of where it fits in. You're going to know that can't be Etruscan because it has this, or no, that can't be Egyptian because it hasn't yet developed a particular stylistic cue, for instance. So just recognizing where those sculptures fit in the timeline is going to be very important. You want to know about the Assyrians. You're going to know about things like the glazed brick. Anytime you see those material advancements, whether it's glazed brick or whether it's ceramic from the Romans, you want to know about did this culture use wood and stone to build? Did they what were their architectural styling cues that we can see reflected? When we look at Persia, you want to know about the Persian growth of that Persian Empire. Kind of understand a little bit about how that Persian sort of takeover is reflected even through their art. Okay, we're going to go to the next. Art of the Egyptian. So the Egyptians are where you're really going to start probably having the most bulk of the questions. There are a lot of questions coming from, because there's a lot to talk about when we look at ancient Egypt. Hieroglyphics, again, whether it's Sumerian, Mesopotamian, if you see anything about writing, you're going to want to know what is it, what's it called, how did it function, and then also how did it play a role in their art? How is it reflected in their art? Pre-dynastic art, you want to be looking at what are those stylistic cues that let you know that that's pre-dynastic and not a later period in that Egyptian art history. Old Kingdom architecture, and this is the Egyptians again are where you're going to start really getting hold of that architectural understanding. Now we've gone from just responding to the environment to creating these massive structures. You're going to want to know what the different structures, what purpose did they serve, how are they constructed, what were the materials used to construct these things, what are these things. You got to know that. You want to be able to describe where the Egyptians established their civilization. Why is it established there? That was one of the earlier things we talked about. You want to know what is a Sphinx, what is that thing, and what role did it play. When we look at their architecture of the Egyptians, you want to look at how they took what the Sumerians, Mesopotamians were doing and built on that, and what things do we see stylistically that continue on into those traditions that follow. Egyptian temples, again, you want to know for any temples, these type of things, you want to know what the purpose of them was, regardless of what era they come from. You want to know a little bit stylistically how you recognize that, and I'm just kind of circling here. How do you recognize the different stylistic architectural cues? Look for specifics. If you can just name one or two specific things that go, I know this building is from this particular time period because of this or that. Not a lot about that. I'm just gonna be honest. I don't think there's a lot about that. Nefertiti. Know a little bit about Nefertiti. Tutankhamun. King Tut. I think I have a question or two about King Tut on there just because I like King Tut. But honestly, most of the questions are going to be directed around the concepts that are most important. Development of society, whether it is how the roads and the physical layout of the society was laid out. Government advancements, as you learn about how the society's changed from religiously inspired to kind of governmental societies. You want to look at how the architecture has changed, the sculpture's changed, and the 2D art as well. Let's look at ancient Greek. There is a chunk from ancient Greece because, again, the Greeks are where we really start getting into. You're going to need to be able to quickly identify geometric and archaic. You're going to want to know the difference between why is something classical, late classical, or Hellenistic. How can we tell those? And again, it doesn't take much to recognize. There's only a few words you're really going to have to say to tell me why this is geometric or archaic or why this is Hellenistic. And the differences are pretty striking. And so just understand what they are. Think about, when we think about the geometric period, think about geometry, what the class. Well, what things are geometric about these types of sculptures. That might be a reminder, a way to kind of think about it. When we look, there's not a lot about orientalizing the art. Honestly, it's going to be mostly about that the stylistic cues that specifically identify those different time periods. So I'm going to go through this one more completely because you're going to want to know what is this and why is it important and what's going on here. Why is this different than what happened just a period before? And so you want to recognize that the stylistic cues that we're looking for aren't dramatic. They aren't complicated. The advancements are slow, recognizable, and simple. And so don't make this more complicated than it needs to be. What are these guys doing that's different than what would have been done earlier? Think about what advancements are being made, and you can see these advancements in architecture being made as they get a little better. Oh, they're getting those things a little better. What are they? And be able to talk about those type of things. You're going to want to know about these different things: cornice, superstructures, columns, and platforms. I can tell you right now, the Greek and Roman DBA is going to focus on, you have got to tell me what are Greek influences in these Roman buildings? How do we know? What's Greek about them? And if you don't know these four things, platforms, superstructures, cornices, you're not going to know. I want you to understand, what is a pediment? What are these frieze? What's each of the different pieces that go into these architectural buildings, so that we can see and understand how things progress. You're going to hear me talk about Neoclassicism when we talk about what are the purpose of those temples, by the way. But when we talk about Greek and Roman architecture, we're going to talk about Neoclassicism, new and classical. That's what we have today, from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s into today. Architects using the Greek and Roman influences in building buildings today. If you look at the White House, the Capitol building, our Capitol building in Kentucky is absolutely neoclassical. And so if you don't recognize what happened in ancient Greece, you're not going to recognize that it happened just a few years ago when we built something here recently. So those are going to be the things that are important to focus on. I hate having to go through the marks like this. Oh, not too far. All right. Temple of Athena. Yeah, I think there is one question about the Temple of Athena. Mostly, definitely is going to be something I'm pretty sure about the fallen warrior. And again, not only are we looking at how the materials changed, how the style, what they created changed, but what they were depicting in these works of art changes dramatically as time goes by. So be able to discuss what are those changes, how do we recognize those changes. We want to look at how did the representation of man change from those very rigid and stylized Egyptian works of art through these very naturalistic, flowing Hellenistic pieces. You're going to know you had better know these things. Let's go back just a little bit. Understanding understanding the Greek classical period, the Greek classical, high classical, the Hellenistic, understanding the progress of these, not just from the standpoint of how they reflected where man was and so forth, but specifically how did the architecture change and how is it different? How is the sculpture different from one of those to the next? This is the Parthenon. I want you to know that. I'm going to ask you to identify the Parthenon very logically. Let's see. The next big thing. I don't know if there's a lot of stuff from this area. Temple of Athena. You're going to want to know that. You're going to know about the Temple of Athena. The early Greek and high classical. You want to know. If why is this when it is and why is it not before this one, and how can we look at these stylistically and identify what are those changes that let us know that one came before the other. Why is this big chunk back here holding on his leg? We talked about that a little bit, and it's mentioned sort of one of those requirements that had to have in sculpture, and there's a reason. I don't think there's a lot about vase painting, late classical period. You're going to definitely need to know all about that late period. Why is this sculpture of Hercules important? But why is it important as it reflects these artistic styles more so even than where its place was in society. Painting, you're going to want to know about Alexander the Great and all that good stuff, and why is he so great, and how was he depicted in art. Architecture did a couple different things. The Greeks and Romans built these unique structures, but they were also kings using that environment around them. So kind of maybe think about how you can talk about those things. And last but not least, we are going to talk about... did we do Hellenistic and Etruscan? I think we went through Hellenistic and Etruscan. No, we didn't do it through Hellenistic and Etruscan. We aren't there yet. Okay. Hippodamus was a Greek city you're going to know about. And again, when we talk about that Persia and how Persia influenced Greeks and so forth. You're going to know about their expansion a little bit. Why is this sculpture of Nike? You're going to need to know. Talk about that a little bit. I'll probably have a slide that will talk about that. And in the multiple choice, I think there's a couple of questions about her as well. Definitely want to know about Aphrodite. Aphrodite was and Venus de Milo. Both are important sculptures. I want to know why. The seated boxer, there's a couple things I want to know. Why is it important? Again, when we look at the depiction of man, why is this significant? When we look at stylistically how it was created, why was it significant? Just real quick, and then we're going to wrap up. Hellenistic style, you're definitely going to be able to recognize this sculpture. Why is it important? Why does it look like it does? Why is it so much different than the things before? And how do we recognize it's so late in this stylistic period? Last but not least, we'll get to Rome. And so when it comes to Rome, there is going to be a question or two on the multiple choice, but for the most part, this is going to be taken care of in your discussion-based assessment. And there's essentially a couple things that I'm going to ask you about. Most important, you're going to know those periods of the Roman history. You're going to want to know what this is, the aqueducts, why are they important. Sanctuary Fortuna, a little bit on the multiple choice. I don't think there's much on the DBA, at least not the one I'm giving. You will want to know the difference between the Basilica, the Amphitheater, and Capitolium. You want to know Pompeii is important, whether it's murals from Pompeii, not a lot about the Roman styles of painting. I honestly don't care. Roman sculpture, though, you definitely want to need to know a little bit about it. Why did it look so real? What did they do? Again, we look at materials changes and methods change. There's a huge one there I'd like to talk about. Yep, you're going to definitely know who this is. Why is he in early imperial art? Who is that? Why is he early imperial art? You're going to definitely want to know what is this? This is that tower and treasure. Why? What is this? Tell me. Why do we know? How do we know it's high imperial? This thing. It's all right there. The answer is right there. Column of treasure is what they call it. You're going to be able to identify these types of early, middle, and late, if you will. And then you definitely want to know, what is this? What is that? What building is it? Why is it? What Greek influences do we see? What Roman influences do we see? And last but not least, you're going to want to identify. Whoop! Went back too far. Nope. Oh, it's right here. Yep, you're going to want to know this image. Why is it late imperial? What is a departure from here? And why is this different than anything we'd seen before? That pretty much takes care of most of everything. Maybe a little bit. Oh, yes, the Arch of Constantine is on the multiple choice. So make sure you know about that as well. That pretty much takes care of what you're going to need to know for your DBA and for your multiple choice. Good luck, and I look forward to seeing you in your DBA.